It's hard to think of a more consequential meeting for the Ukrainian leader.
He's all dressed up today.
He's all dressed up, said President Trump. Zelenskyy, wearing the military-style garb he always does, to make it clear that he's a wartime leader.
I'm here as an arbitrator, as a mediator to a certain extent.
But in the Oval Office, what should have been an informal show of diplomatic niceties quickly descended into animosity.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
It got worse, as if President Trump were trying to break President Zelenskyy.
We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks, of course he has.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this, I tell you. I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out.
The American leader's anger with the Ukrainian leader goes back a long way. Remember that President Trump never forgets a slight.
Thank you very much. It's a good
The two men met at the UN in 2019, but Trump already held a grudge against Zelenskyy, who had refused 2 favors Trump had asked for on an infamous call.
On an absolutely perfect phone call.
Favor 1. Investigate the Ukraine business dealings of then Vice President Biden's son.
We had a perfect phone call with the President of Ukraine.
Favor 2. Hand over a computer server to prove a conspiracy theory about interference in the US elections.
It was actually a beautiful conversation.
Zelenskyy said no. Trump temporarily withheld military aid.
The president's reckless actions make impeachment necessary.
And the revelation of the call led to his impeachment. Last night, a Russian drone hit an apartment block in Zaporizhia, as apartment blocks are hit every night. For Ukrainians, an argument in the Oval Office is not politics. It's not entertaining or even shocking. It's about survival or surrender.
I mean, Lindsay, this may have been performative for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, but it's existential for the Ukrainians, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I've been getting messages from Ukrainians who are just unbelievably upset because they think, where does this leave their future? And then you look at the Ukrainian ambassador who was in the meeting. There was a point where she had her head in her hands and she looked like she was on the verge of tears, which is completely understandable, because everything that they had hoped for from this meeting, that there would be this mineral deal, there would be the possibility that the Americans, that Trump would not side completely with Vladimir Putin, but would come back towards Zelenskyy, all gone.
Especially after what was said yesterday in the same office between Prime Minister Starmer and the President. Where does this lead the different and now shattered shards of the peace process, if you can even call it that?
There is no peace process. What there is President Trump talking to his friend Vladimir Putin and trying to work out how to stop the fighting. Now, the issue is that the Ukrainians will not stop fighting. Even if there is a peace deal agreed between America and Ukraine, in which the Europeans may or may not have a role, that will not stop Ukrainians from fighting to get Russians out of their land. That does not mean that Russia can control Ukraine, because what we know is that although President Trump thinks this is about real estate, a bit of land that could be on this side of the border or that side of the border, that is not what it's about for President Putin.
He doesn't get it, does he?
For President Putin, it's about total control of Ukraine and Ukrainians.
Lindsay Hilson, thank you very much indeed. Well, in the last hour, I spoke to Kurt Volker, former US ambassador to NATO, who was US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations during President Trump's first term in office. And I began by asking him for his initial reaction to the jaw-dropping encounter in the Oval Office.
Yeah, it is really breathtaking, completely unnecessary. I think that President Trump has worked hard to put together a way forward that will work for Ukraine. It'll work for the United States. It's sustainable, and it would bring a ceasefire and then a more permanent peace. And to get into an argument with the President of the United States like that in the Oval Office in front of the press, completely unnecessary.
So who started the argument, as far as you're concerned?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Zelensky should have known how to play this. Trump is going to say certain things that are going to be a way of him to frame the narrative for an American audience. Zelensky doesn't need to challenge him on that or to demand security assurances from the United States in a public setting when he knows what Trump is going to say about that.
It wasn't exactly as if President Trump was pulling his punches. And of course, Vice President Vance also got involved in the fight. And it was proper sort of school playground stuff, really unseemly.
Yes, and as I said, completely unnecessary and predictable that, Trump and Vance, they feel that they are doing something that's going to help make U.S. support for Ukraine sustainable and to help end the war without giving the store away to Russia. And I think Zelensky needed to play this much differently. Instead, by challenging that, he actually irritated his hosts. And I hope that it does not derail this effort.
Trump said that this makes great television. That was his throwaway remark at the end. He also said, I'm glad we're having this row in front of the American people. Do you think he wanted this to be a public dispute?
No, I don't think so. I think he wanted this to be showing that he could deliver a deal. And I think it is irritating to him, very frustrating to him, that Zelensky has now disrupted what should have been a positive day for the White House. I'm glad that the president said, welcome to come back when he's ready to sign, because the war is still a reality for people in Ukraine, and we do have to find a way through this.
What does this do to people like Keir Starmer, who was love-bombed by Trump in the same room just yesterday? That seems like ancient history now. He's in a rather awkward position, isn't he?
I wouldn't say an awkward position. I mean, Europe has an interest in seeing Ukraine secure and successful. Keir Starmer and Macron from France were putting together the idea of a European force to help make sure that once there's a ceasefire, Putin doesn't just attack again. Those would be good steps and still essential steps. But now one of the key components here, which is a commitment of the United States to stay engaged in Ukraine, that's now up in the air. And I fully expect what President Trump will do is start suspending assistance to Ukraine because there's no deal.
Both Vance and Trump repeatedly said that Zelensky had never thanked them for American aid. Is that actually true?
Well, never, it's not true. He has many times, whether in the context of their sitting down together in the Oval Office. I can't say, I didn't see the full video, but I think that's what he was referring to.
Kurt Volker, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure, thank you.
So how is all this going down in Ukraine itself? Joining me now from Kyiv is Ukrainian MP Inna Sovsun. Inna Sovsun, it's been a very difficult day for Ukraine. What's your reaction to what you heard and saw in the Oval Office on your television screen?
Well, I think it wouldn't be too much to say that we are, of course, in shock with everything that we have seen. We knew that the conversation would not be easy, but we definitely didn't expect it to be so charged and so difficult. And frankly speaking, at some points, very offensive towards the Ukrainian president. I do not think that he deserved this. I do not think that the accusations made against him and against us as a country were fair. And I think that there is this great feeling of injustice amongst Ukrainians for being treated this way.
I mean, President Trump has just posted on his social media platform that it was President Zelensky who was disrespectful and didn't thank America enough for America's help for Ukraine. What's your response to that accusation?
Well, look, we are extremely grateful to the Americans for all the aid that they provided. They have indeed been very helpful over the course of the last 3 years, and we're grateful for that. But now we're being his gratefulness doesn't extend to us accepting the agreement, which guarantees nothing to us. that would not be the smart decision on the Ukrainian side to do something like that. So I think that this is the reality here. We have been the victim of the attack, and yet we are being talked down to, and we are not seeing Trump talk in the same manner to the Russians, who are actually the real aggressor over here.
Do you see any way back from this row at all?
Well, we have to try, because after all, despite all the emotions of this day, which are still ongoing and still in development, I do think we have to keep our heads calm, cool, and realize that after all, we are part of the same Western civilization. We all share the same values. We all respect liberal values, democracy, everything that Putin hates. So after all, at the end of the day, this is what unites us. So we have to keep on talking, but also critically important how the Europeans will react right now. And I think that is the critical element in this day altogether.
And of course, there was a meeting in London on Sunday hosted by Prime Minister Starmer. I mean, you could argue, could you not, that both President Trump and Zelensky are quite impulsive characters. Does Zelensky now need to apologize very publicly to Trump in order for any kind of ceasefire process to get back on the road?
Well, if there is a chance to get back on track with the Americans, we should do everything in our power. That is critically important, because despite what President Trump says that Ukrainians don't want peace, nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. It's our lives that are being lost. It's our cities which are being destroyed. It's us who are the victims here and who don't want this war to continue, under no circumstances. But what is even more critical for me as a citizen of Ukraine and as a mother, I don't want any piece of the deal that will end up in yet another war in which my son will have to fight. It's enough that my partner is fighting in these front lines right now. I don't want the deal that will also force my son into the front line a few years from now.
Okay. Ina Softon, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And Lindsay is still here on the roof. Lindsay, it feels like spring out here today, but in there, it felt like winter, didn't it?
Oh, it's spring in Moscow, I would say. Dmitry Medvedev, who is one of President Putin's attack dogs, has just tweeted. He has referred to President Zelensky as an insolent pig. He has said he was slapped down as he should be in the White House. It's completely clear that the Russians are totally delighted with the humiliation of President Zelensky, and they think that this is what will give them the advantage.
Do you think they knew it was coming?
Who knows if they knew it was coming? But what we do know is that President Zelensky, who was ushered out after the argument and made to leave very quickly, is now on his way to London, where he will be meeting with European leaders who will try and see if there is anything they can salvage from this.
And what could they salvage, do you think?
It's very hard to know what they can salvage. Of course, we do know that President Trump goes backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
He says nice things one day about someone and horrible things the next day. I think it depends the extent to which President Putin has convinced President Trump that the best way forward is for Russia to get everything it wants and for Zelensky and Ukraine to surrender.